Under the waning light of the prairie dusk, the sky stretched wide as an ocean turned upside down, its bruised purples and soft embers of gold spilling across the horizon. A young woman knelt by a fire that hissed and spat, the smoke curling like restless spirits into the cooling air. Her name was Winona, only 20, yet her face carried the weight of years spent unseen. She stirred the blackened pot before her with a slow, tired rhythm, the wooden spoon clinking against iron as if marking time she could not escape. Each scrape felt like an echo of her life, endless, repetitive, contained within the narrow circle of work and silence. She whispered into the flames words no one else would ever hear, "All my life I've only stirred pots." The confession hung there, fragile as smoke, fading quickly as though the world itself had no wish to hold it. Yet in her chest, it burned like shame. The townsfolk saw her only as the pot-stirrer, the girl who warmed stews for others but had no story of her own. She was useful, yes, but never cherished, never chosen. Sometimes she thought she had become part of the cookware itself, an object of necessity, without voice or soul. But as the prairie darkened, she heard something that stirred her stillness, the faint clop of hooves against the dry earth. Her hand tightened around the spoon. The sound grew nearer, measured, deliberate, until a lone figure emerged from the fading light. He rode a bay horse with a coat that gleamed like worn leather, and he sat tall, though his shoulders carried the heaviness of miles traveled without destination. Wabun was his name. 30 years had etched him into something between man and myth, a cowboy who drifted from trail to trail, leaving whispers of his presence behind him like footprints that vanished in the dust. His face was shadowed beneath the brim of his hat, but his eyes, when they met Winona's across the flickering fire, were steady, dark pools that did not judge. He reined in the horse, but did not dismount. He simply watched her for a long, quiet moment, as though her presence was answer enough to some question he had carried across the desert plains. Winona looked back at him, her breath catching. She had learned long ago not to expect notice, not to dream of being more than invisible labor. And yet here was a stranger, pausing in his wandering, lingering for no reason she could understand. She dropped her gaze quickly, ashamed of the tears that threatened to rise again. Wabun dismounted at last, his boots crunching against dry grass. He nodded at her, a small motion, but not unkind. "Evening," he said, his voice rough like gravel smoothed by rain. He asked nothing, offered nothing more. And yet, Winona felt her heart beating too loudly in her chest, as though her body knew this moment carried a weight her mind could not yet name. The fire crackled between them, its glow catching on her hands, her damp lashes, his worn coat. Silence spread, but it was not the hollow silence she knew from the townfolk. This one carried possibility, a stillness that seemed to ask if life might hold something beyond pots and whispers. In town, people would talk. Already, she imagined their smirks, their murmured cruelty. Why would a man like him look twice at a girl like her? She could almost hear their laughter carried by the prairie wind. Shame pressed heavy on her chest. She turned back to the pot, stirring again, as if retreating into the only identity she knew. Yet Wabun did not walk away. The horse shifted restlessly, but he placed a calming hand on its mane, his boots rooted where they were. Something about her stillness seemed to tether him, though he would never say why. A wanderer did not need reasons, only instinct. That night passed, and the next, and the next. Wabun appeared again by her fire, sometimes with a loaf of bread tucked in his stolbag, sometimes with a flask of clean water, once with a carved bone charm shaped like a bird in flight. He said little, but his offerings were steady, unspoken gestures of care that unsettled her more than any words could. Winona would thank him softly, unsure if gratitude was enough, unsure if she deserved even that. Whispers began in town soon after. They called her foolish, pitiful, a girl so desperate for scraps of kindness that she mistook pity for love. Each word was a thorn driven deeper into her heart. She wanted to believe his presence meant something more, but doubt gnawed at her. Still, when he returned each evening, sitting quietly beside her as the fire warmed their shadows, she could not turn him away. One evening, as thunderclouds stacked like dark fortresses above the prairie, she gathered the courage to ask him why he came. Her voice trembled, almost lost beneath the restless wind. "Why do you linger here, with me?" Wabun's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on the storm. He said nothing, only adjusted his hat as if shielding himself from more than rain. The silence carved into her chest like a blade, for she feared the truth was as the town claimed, that he pitied her, nothing more. The storm broke before he could answer. Rain poured down, relentless, drumming against the earth until the ground itself seemed to shudder. Villagers rushed past her, pulling coats tighter, casting disdainful glances at the girl who remained outside with her fire and her pots. Winona stood drenched, clutching the handle of her pot as though it could shield her from their judgment. She thought herself small, ridiculous, a creature of labor and nothing else. Then Wabin appeared through the sheets of rain. He said nothing, simply lifted his coat and draped it across her trembling shoulders. She gasped at the warmth, at the quiet weight of it, at the way his eyes met hers as though she was not a burden but something worth protecting. Townsfolk muttered nearby, sneers twisting their faces, "She's not fit to wed. She has nothing but her pots." The word struck her deeper than the cold. Yet Wabin did not flinch, did not waver. In the middle of the storm, he took off his weathered hat and placed it gently on her head. The act was so small, yet it broke something open in her. She could not understand why her chest ached so fiercely, why her tears blended with the rain, why the sight of him standing beside her made her feel, just for a moment, that she belonged. Later, when the storm had passed and they huddled near the rekindled fire, Winona's voice cracked as she confessed the words that had haunted her for years. "I've only stirred pots," she whispered. "Nothing more." Wabin's eyes, lit by the flames, softened. He leaned closer, his voice low, almost reverent. "Then let me stir them with you." The simplicity of the words undid her. No man had ever spoken of her work as if it mattered. No man had ever asked to share in it, to honor it. She turned away, afraid to hope, afraid to let such tenderness take root. Yet his hand found hers, lifting her chin with the gentlest of touches. The world stilled in that moment, as though the wind itself had paused to listen. At dawn, the town gathered, their curiosity sharp as knives. They expected scandal, expected her shame to bloom before their eyes. Instead, they found Wabin standing before them, Winona at his side. His voice was steady, without flourish but with the strength of stone. He told them she would be his wife, not from pity, not from obligation, but because her quiet strength had steadied him more than any road ever had. The townsfolk murmured, some sneering, others struck silent. Winona trembled, her heart pounding with disbelief. Yet when Wabin took her hand, she felt something inside her unshackle, the chains of shame falling away like brittle reeds. Together they walked past the muttering mouths, carrying only silence, carrying only dignity. Beyond the town's edge, they built a small life. In a humble cabin, Winona stirred another pot, but this time her hands moved with laughter instead of tears. Wabin mended his boots beside her, humming low, the ordinary moment glowing with a strange, quiet holiness. She realized then that her life had never been small, it had simply waited for someone to see its sacred weight. She whispered into the steam rising from the pot, her voice trembling with awe, "I've stirred pots, yes, but now, I stir life itself." The prairie wind caught her words and carried them into the vast horizon, as if promising that dignity and love are not found in grand gestures, but in small, steadfast acts. And perhaps, dear soul who listens now, that is how all great loves begin, by a humble fire, with two hands learning not just to stir, but to hold.